Good evening, everyone. My name is Ellen Lafferty, and I'm the chairperson of the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area, the Brighton Howell unit. I welcome you to tonight's online forum featuring candidates for the Livingston County Prosecuting Attorney. The candidates will be on the ballot of the 2020 primary election on Tuesday, August 4th. The views expressed tonight are those of the candidates and not of the League of Women Voters or our co-sponsors this evening. This year, the League of Women Voters is celebrating 100 years in expanding voting rights, educating voters, and shaping and influencing legislation at the local, state, and national level. We are pleased to sponsor these forums. The League is a nonpartisan civic and political organization that encourages informed and active participation of all citizens in government. We work to increase understanding of major public policy issues and seek to strengthen and broaden knowledge about our form of government and democracy. While the League does not support candidates or parties, we do take stands on issues we have studied. One of the League's most important goals is to assist voters in making informed choices at the polls. Therefore, we bring you tonight's program. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for tonight, John King of WHMI, who will explain tonight's format and get us started. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ellen. Our forum today will have the following format. Each candidate will have an opening statement of up to 1 minute. Each candidate will have a closing statement of up to 90 seconds. In between, I will ask the questions which come from the Livingston County community and were put together by a panel made up of the League of Women Voters and local media. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to a question. At appropriate times, the timer will hold up their card with the amount of time remaining, and then finally a stop sign. Candidates, please stop when indicated so that we all have an equal opportunity to participate. The order of who speaks first, second, and so on is alphabetical, and the initial responder will be rotated such that each candidate will have the opportunity to be first to answer a question. So number one gets the first opening statement and also the first closing statement. The rationale behind that is so the first person should not be able to make the first impression and the last impression. Now, it's my honor to introduce our two candidates for tonight's forum, Livingston County Prosecuting Attorney Wayne Valancourt and his challenger, David Reeder. And we're ready for your opening statement, David Reeder.
My name is David Reeder, and I'm asking for your vote in the Republican primary. As your prosecutor, I will seek justice for all. I will seek justice for victims and advocate their interests. I will help them seek out appropriate available assistance for their injuries or damages. I will seek justice for those accused of a crime, that they receive a fair and impartial trial, and I will not allow unethical conduct in the handling of cases, and certainly will not put a thumb on the scale of justice. I would seek justice for those convicted of a crime and approve their entry into mental health, drug, and veteran court programming to save their lives and the lives of their families. I will not unduly restrict entry into these programs, and I will promote prosecutorial incentives. Finally, I will seek justice against those in powerful positions who may have broken the law. There will be no special treatment for those in high power. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now, Bill Valancourt, can we have your opening statement?
Thank you. Being an effective prosecutor requires both independence and experience. Being independent means that I work for you. I don't work for the judges. I don't work for the defense attorneys. And I don't answer to the good old boys in the legal community. My primary focus as your prosecutor has always been to protect the public safety of this community and to ensure that the voice of victims are heard. It means making careful decisions based on the facts and the evidence, deciding whether charges are appropriate after a thorough police investigation has been conducted, not based on public clamor or the superficial appeal of a glib Facebook post. It's standing up to those who want to minimize someone's criminal conduct or escape accountability. And while standing up for victims and for public safety requires making tough decisions that some disagree with, standing up for you is what's important. It's what I've done as your prosecutor for the past 8 years, And with your support, I'll do it every single day for the next 4 years.
All right, we'll move on to our first question, and that will be for David Reeder. And I want to remind you that we will be reading the question once, and it will not be repeated unless requested. Considering the recent scandal with the Teresa Brennan case, the faith in the judicial system in Livingston County has been challenged. As you were both officers of the court during this episode, what actions did you take to address the situation, and what actions do you feel were absent?
There's a common misconception that a chief judge has the power to hire, fire, or discipline a fellow judge. And that is a misconception that's in the community. As a chief judge, I had no power to hire Teresa Brennan, to fire Teresa Brennan, or to discipline her. I did on numerous occasions report conduct or actions that she took that I believed were inappropriate and brought those to the attention of the appropriate officials. I testified in her divorce trial regarding her possibly wiping her cell phone. She was later questioned about that in her deposition, which ultimately led to her conviction on a perjury charge. I testified, the next thing I did was in May of 17, I called the state police and reported that she may be possibly having her and her staff wipe her computers. That resulted in a search warrant of the court and the seizing of those computers. I also testified at her Judicial Tenure Commission hearing and as well at her preliminary examination. It was my action that ultimately resulted in her conviction and her removal from office.
All right, Mr. Valancourt.
Well, I think one thing needs to be corrected is his statement that the chief judge has no power or control over a judge. In fact, they do. The chief judge controls the docket of each individual judge. And in fact, Dave Reeder's successor chief judge, in fact, removed Teresa Brennan's docket, so she was no longer hearing any cases. But as soon as we became aware of the allegations regarding Judge Brennan, immediately talked to the defense attorney in the criminal case and told him everything that I knew and all the rumors that we'd heard and that had been circulating. Later on, when it was discovered that there was an affair that was going on after the trial, I immediately did 4 things. I contacted the Judicial Tenure Commission and filed a request to investigate Judge Brennan. I told then Judge Reeder that I was doing that. And he said, well, he should probably do something too. I contacted the Michigan State Police. I requested that they conduct a criminal investigation involving both Judge Brennan and Detective Furlong. I contacted the Attorney General's office. I told them that my office couldn't review any criminal referrals because there's an inherent conflict in reviewing the actions of a sitting judge in our own jurisdiction. And that is in fact what they did. They reviewed it, and they sought charges. I contacted the defense attorney, told him everything that we knew, everything that was going on, and gave them all the information so that they could conduct their independent review. I did everything that needed to be done.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're out of time there. We'll move on to our second question. Is it proper for members of the prosecutor's office to have personal relationships with members of the local judiciary and or law enforcement? And what constitutes a conflict of interest? And Mr. Valancourt, you can go first.
Well, Livingston County is a small legal community, and it's common not only here, but in counties across the state where lawyers have relationships with judges. There are defense attorneys that have had very close personal relationships with judges, vacation together, relationships that were pre-existing what was going on, when they became elected to the bench. So it's certainly not improper for those relationships to exist. Judges, they're not cloistered. They're not expected to completely divorce themselves from the community. Prosecutors are no different. There are always, prosecutors know judges. They're in front of judges every day, and it's not uncommon for them to be friends. Prosecutors with police officers, again, we work with police officers every day from all across the county. And again, it's not uncommon for people who've worked closely together to become friends. So as long as the relationships remain professional and appropriate and doesn't impact the job, that's not a problem. But when it does cross that line, then it becomes an issue. But you can't simply have individuals that go to the office and that's all they do is focus on their work and they have no lives whatsoever. It's appropriate and common. Judges do that, as I've indicated, not only in this county. You see our judges at a lot of events, at a lot of things. And so it's common to know people, not just the lawyers, but members of the community as well.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Reeder.
The thing that I said at the time that I ruled on Teresa Brennan's recusal in the Kowalski case was that judges don't live in a bubble. And they do have contact with those in the community, the lawyers, police officers, etc. An occasional conduct where you might meet somebody at a social gathering is certainly not inappropriate. But what we saw in the Kowalski case was it rose to the level where it was not just incidental or occasional conduct, it was extensive and pervasive. This extensive and pervasive conduct was known at the time that I ruled on whether or not Judge Brennan should be disqualified in the Kowalski case. Detective Furlong, in his deposition that he gave to the state police under oath, testified to the egregious nature of the extent of the conduct and contact with Judge Brennan and with assistant prosecutors from Mr. Valancourt's office. When I asked on the record for a statement from Mr. Valancourt and Pam Maas, who was there as well, if they knew of any facts, they did not reveal any facts. And yet we know that they knew. They knew. They knew.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our third question. And this will be for Mr. Reeder. What do you think the role should be for the prosecutor's office in helping to address the county's opioid epidemic?
Well, Livingston County was one of the first counties to have a project to opiate. My district court administrator, Francine Zisk, was involved with that. It's primarily an educational component. And whether it's somebody from the prosecutor's office, whether it's somebody from the court or the court administration, it's important that this communication takes place. And I think that there have been police agencies that have been involved with the educational component there. And it's certainly important that that take place. And whether you're in the prosecutor's office, whether you're in the probation department, whether you're in the court, I think we all have an obligation to assist those in the community who are suffering from that epidemic.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Valancourt.
Well, my office has long been involved in the effort to fight the abuse of opioids. We've been involved with Wake Up Livingston, which is, again, a public educational effort to involve the community and educate the community in the harms to opioid abuse. We've worked with the Livingston County Alliance to make sure that all of our local police agencies have the big red barrel so that people know how to properly dispose of unused drugs, because that's the biggest source of the problem with opioids is people have them in their medicine cabinets and leave them there, and then their kids and family, they get into it, and that's how they start abusing it. So we've been a big supporter of that program. We've also been supportive of police efforts where people who are in need of immediate assistance can do that and go to their local state police post and get help rather than being arrested. And then finally, we're very involved in our drug court. We're a key player in the drug courts. My staff are deeply involved in it. One of my assistant prosecutors, Angela Del Vero, is very dedicated and involved, as is the entire office, in making sure that we identify individuals who are appropriate for drug court and that are qualified for drug court so that they can take advantage of those services and hopefully avoid coming back into the criminal justice system.
All right, thank you very much. We will now move on to our fourth question, and this will go to Mr. Valancourt. Would you support a countywide mandate for the police use of body cameras?
Well, ultimately, that's up to every individual police department to make that determination. There are a number of police departments that are already doing that. There's obviously cost issues involved that need to be addressed. Some smaller departments, quite frankly, can't afford to do that. We've worked with the departments that do have body cams because, frankly, they are a useful tool, not only for assessing use of force incidents, but in criminal investigations. There's an objective record of what goes on. In fact, a number of years ago, there was a police shooting in Brighton Township, and because of body cams and dash cam video, the incident was right on camera. And so it was very clear and obvious that the police use of deadly force was appropriate in that circumstance. I think it's a useful tool, but ultimately it's up to each department to make that decision as to whether or not that works for them. We would support their decision if they decide to use it.
All right, Mr. Reeder?
I would support the use of body cams across the county on a countywide basis. When I was on the county board of commissioners, and we were converting to a centralized dispatch where the police, fire, EMS could all use the same central dispatch and be able to communicate with each other. On a countywide basis, the county assisted those departments with financial support so they could make the transition. As a result, we're one of the only counties that has a central dispatch. I think that perhaps something might be able to be done similarly with body cameras. There's a forfeiture money that comes into the prosecutor's office. Perhaps that could be used, but they are an effective, useful tool. We've seen that. We've seen cameras being used with all the recent events, and they certainly are supportive of what occurred. And possibly we can avoid some of the tragedies that have occurred. So I do support their use. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll now move on to our fifth question, and Mr. Reeder, you'll be answering this first. Do you believe that systemic racism is an issue either nationally or in the Livingston County judicial system? And please explain your answer.
Racism certainly does exist, both in our community and across the United States. I sometimes am concerned by the stereotyping of Livingston County as a racist community. And I think that we get unfairly branded with that taint. But yes, I believe that racism exists. I believe it exists across the entire United States. I believe in the Black Lives Matter movement and am supportive of their legitimate protests. But certainly, I stand with John James on this point. I think we can all agree that the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, was a tragedy, but nobody should be using that tragedy as an excuse to burn, loot, or pillage and destroy.
All right, Mr. Valancourt.
Yes, I mean, the very definition of systemic racism means that it is inherent in the system. And I think that nobody can quarrel with it, that it exists throughout this country. And unfortunately, it exists in Livingston County. But I think it's an effort that Livingston County has long taken a very aggressive approach to trying to fight that and trying to fight the perception of Livingston County that persists from the actions of an individual back in the 70s. I mean, it still has an impact today. I mean, we will have witnesses from the Black community that have to come to court and testify here in Livingston County, and they call us and they're afraid to do so. And, you know, we try to explain that Livingston County is a safe place. We welcome everyone, but that is still out there. I mean, there is still implicit bias. Everybody makes their judgments and determinations based on their own backgrounds and where they come from, and the areas that they live in and who they interact with. So I think that Livingston County has made a strong effort to fight that, and I support it. I mean, this county has worked hard to rid itself of those vestiges, and is to be congratulated for that. And it's something that we don't tolerate, you know, racism or discrimination, and this county doesn't either. And so I think it's a continuing effort, a continuing fight,
Okay.
one that we're engaged in.
All right, to our sixth question. I'd like you to list 3 experiences you have had that would make you the most qualified candidate to be Livingston County's prosecutor. Mr. Valencourt, you can go first.
Well, I have a rather unique background. One experience I have that is very significant is that for 13 years I volunteered as a police officer for a small police department in a different county. That has greatly informed how I understand the criminal justice system, how it works on the street, how it affects our police officers every day, and how they're forced to make split-second decisions that are then later second-guessed in a courtroom. I mean, I had a circumstance where we stopped a car and there was a gun in the car and somebody was reaching for it. It's one thing to read about that in a police report, but it's a second thing to actually experience it and know what fear the officer feels and how that affects their judgment and what they do. I think that experience has been extremely important. My experience as a prosecutor, I've been a prosecutor for 27 years. I've handled every kind of case from drunk driving to armed robbery to murder. I've handled investigations from the beginning through the conclusion. I've argued precedent-setting cases in the Court of Appeals and the Michigan Supreme Court. I think that experience is something that can't be duplicated. Finally, I do have some experience as a private lawyer in private practice before I came to Livingston County. That has given me an insight as to how the practice of law works. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Reeder.
I'm very proud of my efforts with the specialty courts in this county. When I started as a judge, we had a adult drug court. I was able to enlarge that drug court, add a sobriety court to it. We went from a part-time, and I mean very part-time individual that assisted with that, and we enlarged it to the point where we have a department now that handles the specialty courts. Sarah Applegate was recruited from La Casa to assist us with that. And during my administration as chief judge, we added a veterans court, mental health court. We added a family dependency court. We added a award-winning by Governor Snyder multi-systemic therapy court, a juvenile drug court, and we established a CASA program with partnering with La Casa on that. I've also managed, in managing the court, I've managed a very large department, one of the largest budgets from the county general fund, with quite a few employees. So I do have that administrative experience as well. And then I have handled the most difficult cases facing this community, the freeway shooter case, the fungal meningitis cases, and then I have done numerous felony trials, much more than Mr. Valencourt.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to our final question. Mr. Reeder, you will answer first. What do you think are the biggest challenges and or top priorities facing the prosecutor's office, and how will you address them?
Well, I think we need to restore trust in the judicial system because of everything that's occurred over the last 7 years. You think back to the Kowalski trial, that was 2013. And as I went around the state to various seminars as a judge and talked to my fellow judges around the state, it was obvious that there was a perception that justice was not being done here in Livingston County. Certainly with the Kowalski case, with Detective Furlong's testimony, we have seen the involvement of the prosecutor's office with that lack of trust in the judicial system, putting their finger on the scale, using their connections with Judge Brennan inappropriately, has destroyed within our community that trust. So for me, it's very important. It's the reason that I left being a circuit court judge, the only reason, notwithstanding some of the things that have been said about me. The only reason I left being a circuit court judge was to run for this position. And I certainly will do everything I can to restore faith and trust back in our community by making changes and restoring trust in the judicial system and trust in the prosecutor's office.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We will now move on to our closing statements.
Wait, do I get a chance to answer that one?
Sorry. Okay. Just eager to get out and enjoy the weather. My mistake. My apologies. Mr.
No, that's fine, John. I think some of the challenges that we're going to face and priorities is, as we've been dealing with the COVID crisis, needing to the increasing reliance and use of technology. I mean, it's something our office took the lead on statewide and becoming paperless. But now there's greater use of video. We need to be able to take advantage of that within constitutional restrictions. The Supreme Court just came down with a decision this week that's going to have a real impact on the ability to use that in criminal cases. So I think that's going to be a challenge. And then as we come out of this, the real challenge is going to be that essentially, I mean, we've not had trials for months. Cases involving people that have been out on bond, there's been no progress on those cases. We're going to have a huge backlog in our system that's going to need to be resolved so that cases can move forward and we can get resolutions that are fair for victims and fair for the community. That's a challenge. There's going to be challenges in criminal justice reform. There's a lot of changes that have been discussed. Prosecutors have been at the forefront, looking at certain areas where certain laws can be decriminalized, certain traffic violations made to be misdemeanors, certain misdemeanors made to be civil infractions. That's going to be significant. But also, what's also going to be a priority is to maintain the continuing independence of the prosecutor's office, to ensure that the prosecutor's office works for the people and not for any select few.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we will now move on to our closing statements. And we will begin with David Reeder.
In closing, I want to thank the League of Women Voters, the Livingston Post, and WHMI for sponsoring this event. I want to go back on a couple of things that were brought up. For docket removal, Mr. Valancourt indicated that my successor as Chief Judge, Miriam Cavanaugh, did a docket removal from Judge Brennan. That happened in June of 2018. What Mr. Valancourt failed to mention is, my statement remains true, Chief Judge cannot hire, fire, or discipline a judge. And the docket removal has to be done with the consent and approval of the State Court Administrator's Office, which during my tenure as Chief Judge, I asked for and did not receive. I was not allowed by the State Court Administrator's Office to remove Judge Brennan. And in closing, please vote for me in the August primary. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Valancourt, your closing statement.
Just a brief rejoinder, as the Chief Judge, Dave Reeder gave Teresa Brennan the Kowalski case. It was his choice. He did it to help so she could assist with the circuit court docket. He could have taken away that case from her at any time for any reason or no reason, but he never saw fit to do so. He gave a double murder case to a judge who'd never presided over a felony. As we began this evening, I talked about how an effective prosecutor needs to be both independent and experienced. I've always been independent. I work for you and no one else. And I'm the only one here who has the real life, everyday experience of actually prosecuting a case. Experience is not something you get by simply watching someone else present a finished product in court. It's not for beginners, and it's not a retirement job. Experience means working with police as they investigate a case. It means consulting with the victims, assessing the strengths and weaknesses of a case, and identifying and analyzing the issues. It's deciding how to best achieve justice in the individual case for the victim and the community. I have 27 years experience, and I thank you for your support.
All right, thank you. Thank you both, gentlemen, and I will now turn it over to Ellen Lafferty for closing remarks.
All right. The League wants to thank the candidates for participating in tonight's forum and to those in the public who've contributed questions. We also want to thank the technology assistant provided by Glenn Fisher at the Heartland Cromaine Library. And finally, to our partners, WHMI and the Livingston Post, for making this program possible. All of our forums will be available for viewing on our Facebook and webpage. You can also go to vote411.org, which is the League's voter resource guide covering local, state, and federal candidates and current proposals that are going to appear on your ballot. And you can also view tonight's candidates forum on that site. WHMI and the Livingston Post will be sharing these forums on their platforms as well. The League reserves the right to publicize the forum and may, at their option, invite the media or some other entity not associated with any of the candidates or campaigns to provide televised, radio, or other coverage of the forum. Copyright ownership of the tapes or transcripts resides with the League. The candidates and their supporters will not use the forum, portions of the forum, or any audio clips, video clips, or transcripts for political advertising or other purposes without written permission from the League of Women Voters. With the passing of Proposal 3 in 2018, all voters are eligible to cast absentee ballots. In addition, while voters are encouraged to register ahead of time, Michigan law now provides for same-day voter registration by going to your local clerk's office. Just remember, no matter how you do it, be sure to vote in the August 4th primary election. Good night, everyone, and thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.